Hello guys, welcome to our YouTube channel. If you haven't yet already subscribed, please subscribe and hit the notifications button so that you can get notifications when we upload new videos. All right, today we are looking at pivot tables. So we are going to cover what a pivot table is, why do we need to pivot data, and how to pivot data. That's the practical side of it. And also look at adjusting pivot table properties. Okay, let's get started. We have a lot to do. Wikipedia definition for a pivot table states that it is a table of statistics that summarizes data into sums, averages, or other statistics and groups in together in a meaningful way. So a pivot table, you have to summarize the data. It's pointless if you do a pivot table and you don't summarize data, you just show it as big as your original data. So it has to summarize data and also in a meaningful way, meaningful to you and to your audience as well. So each and every pivot table will differ depending on who is your audience and their level of understanding and also what you want to show them. So when you are doing a pivot table, the first thing you need to do is to know exactly what you want to present. Then you can see how you are going to arrange your columns and rows so that it can drive that meaning you want to put across. It goes on to say that a pivot table arranges and rearranges data. So when you are slicing and dicing, you are arranging and rearranging, and you can drag the rows around to just present in the better way you want to show in order to draw attention to the useful information. So if you have particular useful information, the way you arrange and rearrange data, you have to draw attention to that information. And also it should lead to finding figures and facts much more quicker. So think about you have this large dam of data, you have a big table of data, and you just want to quickly find the facts within that data. So the best way will be to use a pivot table and just quickly slice and dice it and see if you can find facts about your data. So in my next example, you'll see that I have data set on this side. So this one is at around 2000 rows of data, but I've nicely summarized it into a pivot table on the right here. So this is 48 pages compared to a 1 page. So here I can see facts quickly. For example, I can see the total for Africa, I can see the total for America, total for Asia, and total for Europe, and I can see who are the salesperson in Africa or the salesperson, and I can answer questions much quicker. So from here, it is very difficult to answer these questions which I've just spoken about. So for example, if you were to be asked, what is the total sales for the country Zimbabwe? It will be very difficult for me to answer from this data set because I will have to do filters. But with this one, I can easily see that, okay, here is my Zimbabwe. I can see here, these are the three salesperson in Zimbabwe. I can also answer questions like, what is the total for Africa from here? So I can see total units sold in Africa is 10,000. Also with the assistance of, I've added the slices here. So these are slicers. So I can use the slicers, for example, to just pull 1 month. If I just want to see for June, I will just click on 6, and it will show me for June. And also likewise, I can do the slicers for the years. I can slice basically for any pivot field that I have here. So this is a great benefit that comes with pivoting data. You can be able to answer questions much quicker. Imagine if you are in a meeting and you take with you this data set here. It is going to be very difficult. If someone asks you a particular question, it's going to be very difficult for you to answer that question, and it is going to take long. You'll be able to answer it. For example, if you use a filter, you are going to be able to answer how many units were sold in Zimbabwe in January. But you will have to do the filters and it will take time. And if you have a lot of data, it might take also time to refresh and show the totals. But if you just take this, you can just click on the slicer for Zimbabwe, then you see the total at the bottom for Zimbabwe. So this is what a pivot table can do for you. So today, what we are going to cover is the pivot fields. We are going to understand the pivot fields. What are the fields and what does it mean if it's a column? What does it mean if it's a row? We are going to understand that. And we are going to also look at renaming rows and columns of a field. So for example, back here, if I want to change this from country to nation, I can, how do I rename it? Or if I want to change this from salesman to salesperson, because sales people can be unisex. For example, Nadia here is a lady, so it can be a salesperson, so it might be offensive to some people to use salesman. So how do I change that within a pivot table without editing my original data? Here we are going to also look at adding pivot slicers. So these slicers here, which makes it super easy and super quick to slice and dice my data. How do I add them? We are going to look at that as well, and also configuring them as well. You can see this slicer has rows going down and this one have rows going this side. So how do I configure those slicers? So we are going to also look at that. After that, we are also going to look at pivot table display options. So this blue theme that I've used, you can change. If you like black theme, you can use black theme, orange theme, or whatever theme. So I'm going to show you where you can change the themes here. And also the slicer also have options where you can also change the themes as well. So I'm going to quickly show you that as well. Then we are going to also cover some table properties, pivot table properties, which is the auto size on refresh and the tooltips also. And we are going to look at subtotals and grand totals. For example, here, it will be difficult, for example, to show you what is the total for Zimbabwe without filtering for Zimbabwe. So you can also add subtotal for country as well at the bottom here. So I will show you how to add that. For me, I have removed it because for some nations, for example, Egypt, we only have one salesperson. So it's not necessary to have a subtotal there. So for me, I just removed it, but you can also leave it there or you can add it. So I'm going to show you how to add subtotals as well. And also grand totals. Here we have grand total column here. So you can remove it if you don't want to see the grand total. So I will also show you how to do that as well. All right, we have quite a lot to cover today. So let's head straight away to our sample pivot so that I can show you exactly how a pivot works. Okay, so this is my Excel workbook and this is my pivot table which I have prepared for today. We are going to learn how to do this pivot table. But before we learn how to do it, I'm just going to show you at the end of the lesson what are we going to be able to do. So this is basically the data set we have. So you can see this is 2,400 rows. So we have 2,400 rows of data. So if you go into a meeting with this data and someone asks you how many sales or how many sales were done in Zimbabwe. So if you want to answer that question without using a pivot table, you have to use a slicer. So you insert a slicer here. So you can also learn on how to add slicers in my other videos as well. I have videos on slicing data. So you can say, okay, I insert a slicer here. Then you can say, okay, I want to select Zimbabwe. You select your Zimbabwe here. Then you can actually just add that together, or you can just highlight, add the total quantity sold here. So you can just highlight and edit. And you can look here at the bottom here. You can see here, it's showing that in Zimbabwe, the total was 8,550. But it has taken me a while to do it. If I have a pivot table to answer the same question, let me just remove this slicer. If I have a pivot table to answer the same question, I can just go here on the slicer and say, I click Zimbabwe. Then I can actually answer that it's 8,550. So I answered the question much more quicker. Let me just zoom it. I answered the question much more quicker than when I am using the raw data here. And also I can just print the full report. And just print the full report and send it out. It's just one page compared to this data, which is 48 pages. So this one page, I can just print it and share it with my attendees for that meeting. Then they can see the answers for themselves. So it's much, much more convenient to have a pivot table. So now that we can see the benefits, we are going to head straight away to the working template, where we are going to see how we can actually do it, how to actually build that pivot table. Before we head there, I'm just going to show you also the other slicers which you can use, like the month slicer. You can select, okay, this is just for March, and you can also select here, this is the March 2020 total sales. You can also select August, for example. You can select December, and you can also change the years, and you can answer the questions much more quickly, or much more quicker on the fly. So it's much more efficient to use a pivot table, especially when you are presenting. You actually present straight away from your Excel workbook using a pivot table with these slicers. And you can also give someone who doesn't know much about Excel, and they can be able to work with your data. So this is quite a great tool for Excel reporting. All right, let's go straight to the working workbook where we can actually do the example. All right, so here we are going to actually learn how to replicate the same pivot table. So this is the pivot table we want to replicate using this data. So this is the detailed data we are going to eventually use, but to make it much more easier to understand, I'm going to first start by doing a pivot table with this small data set. All right. So if you want to insert a pivot table, you click anywhere in your data and push Ctrl A, or alternatively, you can just select here, then you press down your shift, you select where your data ends to just select all your data. Then after you select your data, you go on the ribbon under Insert Command button, then you select a pivot table. So let me cancel that. I just want to show you something before I do that. So you can say insert recommended pivot table here. So you can see there are quite a number of recommended pivot tables. So if you really don't know what you want to see, you can just come and pick one here and edit it later. But because I know exactly what I want to build, I'm going to say insert a pivot table. Then it is going to ask me, the first thing is saying select the range. So I've already selected my range of data. You can see that it's showing that it's selected here. So I don't need to change anything here. Then it's asking you whether you need to put it on a new worksheet or existing worksheet. So for now, I'm just going to go with a new worksheet. Then I say okay. The moment I say okay, you can take note here. It has created a new sheet called sheet 1, and here is my pivot table. Currently, it has no data because I need to select the fields that I want to see. Now, on the right here, you can see that whilst I'm selecting on the pivot table, you can see there is a task pane which is showing here. Okay, let me just select anywhere else in the worksheet. So you see the task pane disappears, but the moment I select in my pivot table, the task pane reappears. So here it shows where I can drag my fields. So here it's showing rows. So the rows, guys, let me just do some art here. Okay. So we just need to quickly understand what these fields are. So the first thing we see here on the fields is filters. So filters, it basically goes on top of your pivot table. Okay, I'm just showing you with some art here. So this will be your filters. So all the fields you want to filter with, you can put them under the filters. So it will show on the top of your pivot table. Then the next thing that we have there is rows. Okay, rows are the fields that you want to see on the left of your pivot table. then columns, columns are basically the ones you will see going to the right, on top, going to the right of your pivot table. So if we just go back to my original pivot table, you can see these are my columns here. Okay, these are column 1, column 2, column 3. These are basically my rows. Then you have the last thing you have is the values. So values is what is going to populate inside here. So in a nutshell, this is how a pivot table will look like. So it will have filters, or you can leave it out without filters. Instead of putting filters, that's where you can also put slicers. So you can use slicers instead of filters. Then you have your rows and your columns and your values. So it has 2 dimensions. So this is dimension 1, then dimension 2. And here you show whatever. So for this particular row and this particular column, what is the value here? So let me just delete these shapes. Now let's go ahead and build our first pivot table. So the first question you ask yourself, what do you want to see? So I want to see the region in which the salesperson is. Secondly, I want to see his country. Then I want to see the name of the salesperson. So this is the order. You start with the highest level you want to see, which is the region. Then from the region, we go to the country. From the country, the region is basically the continent. Then the country, then the salesperson. Then I can also say, okay, I want to see the product as well. Then from there, I can say, okay, you probably would want to see the year and the month as well. But you can see here, because my year is a number and month is a number, it automatically assumes that it's the values. So I can just drag it and put it, maybe I want it on the columns here, on the columns. Okay, so you can see my year and month are going this side. Then I can say my value is going to be the quantity sold, or let me just put total sales for now as my values. Then it populates with the total sales in the values here. So this is basically how to build a pivot table. So you just drag your columns over here and your rows over here. And you can also say, I want to be able to filter by year. Let's say I just want the total. Let me just say I want to be filtered by year. So the moment I drag year to the filters, you can see that it's already here on the filters on top here. So I can just select what I want to filter with. I just have one here. So it's showing that I'm filtering with here. Let's say I also say I don't want the months going this side. I just want to use it as a filter. I can also drag it over here. So you can see now we are seeing only the total sales. And here we can filter the year. Then we can select, okay, we can filter the month. So we can select one here for Jan. So we can see this is the Jan. There is the Feb. There is April. So you can also filter like that. So you can choose whether you want to put them on the columns or on the filters, or you can also say, I want to see the months also on the rows. So you can drag it anywhere basically. But what you have to now consider is, will it make sense to show your data this way, or maybe it doesn't make sense? All right, so we have built our first pivot table. Now we are going to try and make it look like the one which I have here. Whilst you are playing with the pivot table properties. All right, so you can see now on my pivot table here, I have region, I have country, I have salesman. So they look like they are columns here, but let me tell you one trick here. They are on the rows, so there is a design. So you can also edit the design of your pivot table, how you want your pivot table to look. You go on the layout here, then you can say choose tabular form. I always prefer the tabular form. I don't know why, but for me it's the best. So you can choose the tabular form here. Then let me just auto resize my columns. So you can see that all these rows here are now showing like the first row, second row, third row, fourth row, fifth row. And we have the values here. But in my example, my pivot table is split, like the products are showing here on top. So we have coffee, we have tea. So the products are on top, which means they are part of the rows. So I need to move my product to the rows. So I move my product. And we can also see in my example that we don't have month. You can check. All we have is region, country, salesman, and we have products on top here. So we have products here on top, and we also don't have the year filter here. So I can take out the year filter. Then the other thing we have on the value is the quantity sold. So we can put the quantity sold. We can just drag it either on the bottom, or we can drag it on top to just arrange it. So if we drag it at the bottom, quantity sold will go on the right. If we drag it on top, quantity sold will go on the left. So this is basically exactly the same pivot table that I have built here with units sold, total sales for coffee and tea, for the salesperson in a particular country, in a particular region, and we have the totals here. So that's exactly the same here. But you can see here we have subtotal for Zimbabwe. But here we don't have that particular subtotal. So here we just need to remove the subtotal. So you can just right click here and remove subtotal. Or if you want to add subtotal, you can just click again, my subtotal is back. But I don't want subtotals, so I'll take out the subtotal. So we only have subtotal for Africa. I need that because here on my sample, we have the subtotal for the region. So you can leave it there. If you don't want it, you can just right click and remove it. Okay. Here it's quite messy because you can see sum of quantity sold. It's too long, so I just want to say quantity sold. I would rather prefer the name units here. So you just type units. Then here, sum of total sales, I just want to say total sales. But look, if I say total sales, me an error to say the pivot name already exists because this, let me just escape. Because look, in my simple data, you see total sales is already there. So it will not allow me to use the same name. So what I can do is I can say total sales and just put an extra space at the end so that it doesn't look exactly the same. Okay, now it can allow me. Okay, next thing, let me just go back to my example. You can see the theme here. It's blue here and light blue here, dark blue and light blue here. So I'll just look for the theme that looks more or less like this one. So they are default themes, so I can just go to design here and you can see pivot table styles here. Then I can pick whichever I want to use. I think I picked this one. Yeah, that's the one. So you can see this is the theme I used. Also, what you can do is you can also format these as numbers. So let me just go home and format it as a number, and I don't want commas for my units. Then I can also format. So look, when I click here on the total cells, it's going to select all the total cells columns. So I say I want its currency, so I'm going to go to number formatting, currency, and I put a dollar. I just want a dollar sign. Then it looks messy if it has so many commas and zeros, so I'll just hide that. I don't want that. So that's basically the number formatting within a pivot table. Then the next thing which I need to do is, you can see my columns, I want them to be centered here. So I'll just normal centering, normal centering. But look for this one now, I want it to span from here to there, and this one to span from here to there. So I want to center it basically across two columns. If I use merge and center, as you can see, it will say it's part of pivot table and you cannot do merge and center. So let me just click OK and show you the trick that you can use. So the trick that you can use is you can select the two columns and you go to merge and center. You to alignment here, you click that arrow, then you choose under here, you say center across selection. So now it's on the center here. You can do the same with that one and also go to alignment and center across selection. Alignment and you center across selection. Okay. So that's basically it. This pivot table now looks more or less like this one. Let me just select Zimbabwe so that you can see, and I just want to, so you can see Zimbabwe F3. Let me just filter here for Charles only. We just want to show Charles. Okay, so this is more or less like my table here, as you can see. Okay, now what I need to add on my So now what I want to add on my other pivot table now is these slicers. So I can be able to slice and dice as I can do here. I can select Argentina, I can select China, I can select America, I can select Europe. So I want to add those slices and dices. But before I do that, I'll just move my pivot table because it's now right on the edge. So I'll just move my pivot table. So it will be starting in row D5. So I'll just select on the foot table, then I just drag it into D5 to start in D5. Okay, then I can just resize it again. Okay, I would want my column size to be the same, so I will just use this. Okay, my column size are the same. Then I'll insert slice. So to insert the slicers, you just go to analyze, you click on your pivot table, then you go to analyze, because if you are clicking elsewhere, it won't show analyze. Okay, so you click here, analyze, then insert slice. What do I want to slice? I want a region slice, a country slice, and I want a year and a month slicer. Then I say okay. So these are all my slicers. So my slicers in my report there, they are showing here. My country slicers are also on this side. Then my year slicers are here on top. But look, this slicer, if I put it here on top, it's going to be difficult because even if I drag it across here, it's only showing the first month. So what I can do is I can come here on the columns. Whilst I'm selecting the slicer, I come here, you can see the columns. Or if it doesn't show automatically, you can click on options, then you come to columns. Then I want to see to have 12 columns. So it has all the 12 columns now showing, and I can select my month from here. So I can now slice my data. Okay, look, I made my columns to look exactly the same, but look what happened now. These ones are much smaller than this one. So if I want to keep that, I can resize them again. Just resize them again. Okay. They are now the same. Then I need to right click here and say pivot table options. Then I untick on the auto fit column width on update, because every time you update, for example, let me not do it now. Let me just go back. If I refresh this, you'll see it automatically resizes every time it updates, or if I click a slicer, it automatically resizes. So let me just resize them. It's a bit too big. Okay, then I can go to pivot table options, auto fit on refresh, and tick it. Then now if I do anything, it doesn't resize, and if I also refresh, it doesn't resize, just refreshes without resizing. Okay, so let me just also move this one to this side and allow this one to be, so if I add more years, I want them to show here, so I can go to options again, and maybe I want to add 5 years, then just 2020 here. If I add 2021, it will just add them here. So you can also edit how your slicers look. So for example, this slicer, I'm selecting it, I can change how it looks, but I just prefer the default one. Okay, so this is basically this pivot table. Now that we have learned how to do a simple pivot table using this simple data, now we just want to extend it to this data set, which is spanning on 2000 rows. So what we could have done is we can also do the same, like where we went and selected the data and go to insert pivot table here, building it from scratch. But because we have already built this pivot table, we can also just edit it and repoint. Instead of pointing to this data, we can now point it to this data set. So this is basically on when you want to update your pivot table and to point to a new data source. So I can just say change data source here. Then it's showing that this is the data source I'm selecting, but I don't want to select that. So I can just select this new sheet, which is the data with more data, and select Control A to select all the data. Okay, then I say, okay, now it's selecting all the data. You can see here, showing the selection. It's selecting all my data now. Then I say, okay. So the moment I do that, you see here how it has exploded. Now it's exactly the same as this pivot table. And look, my slicer still work. So I can still slice and dice. I can dice, I can select a particular month. I can also look how the years have been added here. So they have been automatically added here. And I can use that to just slice and dice as well. So this is how you can also update a pivot table. So I can just resize my slicer here so that it can fit all the countries. So it doesn't need to be that big. Okay. So this is it, guys, with pivot tables. This is how you build a pivot table. Oh, the other thing that I just want to show you is what is called tooltips. So when you select here, it can show you the tooltips here. So when I highlight here, it's showing me a pop-up screen. That's basically what a tooltip is. You can also show me a tooltip here, a tooltip here. You can also rename, you can rename anything. You can also call it continent here. And if you feel like salesman is a bit offensive for ladies in there, you can just say sales or whatever you need to call it. So you can edit whichever part, but you cannot edit here on the values, which is quite cool as well. And on design, just some things you can explore as well. You can explore, you can say, do not show subtotals or show subtotals. So to, if you say do not show subtotals, it's going to remove all your subtotals. And if you say show subtotals, you can choose whether you want to show them at the bottom or on top. If it was on top, it would have been shown on top there. So you can play around these design aspects. You can also say remove the grand total. So if you say remove off for rows and columns, so you see the grand totals have been removed, so for rows and for columns. But if you go back and say on for rows only, so you see the grand totals here. Then we can say also on for columns only, then we have grand totals for columns only. And you can also say on for grand totals on for rows and columns, so for both rows and columns, so we have the grand totals here. So you can also change the way your report looks like. So you can choose, for example, show outline form. This is how the outline form will look like. And you can also say repeat all labels for all columns, or you can show in compact form. This is how the compact form would look. And you can also say show tabular form. I don't want to repeat all the formula, so you can just do not repeat label items. So you play around with these aspects and choose which ones you prefer. You can use any aspect in your report. Also, it depends with the audience. So whichever is easier for you and your audience to understand, you can use that design format. Another cool feature that you can also make use of. So if you select within this, within this pivot table, you can also go to analyze. Then here you can see here it is expand or collapse field. So you can say I want to collapse field. So you choose whichever field you want to collapse, or you can just start clicking. So it's showing that, yeah, you can't expand it any further. Then you can collapse. You see, I can collapse now. If you collapse the first level, you can no longer see the salesperson, but you can see the total for that particular country. And you can also collapse to the region level. And you can actually come here on the plus and just say, I want to expand Africa. Then within Africa, I just want to expand Zimbabwe. Then you can expand Zimbabwe by clicking it here. Or you can just say you want to expand everybody. So you can just expand all the continents. You select on the continent here and expand all the continents. Or you can say, I want to collapse all the country. So you can also make use of that as well to just quickly see whatever you want to see. So if you want to send to the regional manager, probably they don't even want to see the salesperson. So you can just show the country. They just want to see the country and the regions. If you want to send it to the country manager, they will probably want to see the salesperson. So with that, you have to expand to show the salesperson so that the country manager can see all his sales personnel. So this is another cool feature which you can also make use of. And this is a very significant benefit for your pivot tables. All right, last but not least, I just want to quickly show you how you can insert a chart. We are not going to look into detail about that. We'll look at it in next videos. Okay, so you can insert a chart. If you're selecting the pivot and you go to analyze, then you can say insert pivot chart. So I'm just going to quickly insert this pivot chart so you can quickly see how you can insert a pivot chart. Let me just put it on this side here. Okay. So as you slice and dice, look how this will also respond. So it's responding to my slices and dices as well. So you can add more visualization as well to your pivot tables and make your reports much more nicer by just adding a pivot chart as well. So we'll look in detail on how you can edit it to show exactly how you want to show it. But for now, I think this suffices. Okay, that's it, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you for watching. Please, if you liked this video, please hit like button. If you have any questions or comments, please don't forget to put them in the comment section. I will respond to your comments in my next videos. Also, for the sample data, please follow the link in my description and you can download the sample data and you can use it to build your own pivot table. I hope you enjoyed this video. Bye-bye.